Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. Last time, we sort of made our way around town in a lot of ways. We also spent a good deal of time in the Dream. We sort of pondered some of the mysteries of Bloodborne, tried to get a sense of the atmosphere, figure out what's happening, and it seems like people in the city are sort of losing their minds in a way that's a little bit unsettling. Perhaps we're getting transformations taking place behind closed doors. And we're not quite done with that. I sort of realized in between episodes, there's one outlying region I have not been to. I have not been to Hemwick. And if possible, I would like to get that little bit of extra dialogue from Gehrman, but that sort of depends on how cooperative or not, as the case may be, Gehrman is feeling. So I don't know exactly when we're going to get that particular dialogue, but I can definitely say that we should go to Hemwick. So we're going to grab one more quick dialogue. It's probably not really worth the trouble of getting it, but as I've said before, and we'll probably say again, I've got something of a completionist tendency in me. So we're going to warp around there and stop over in the Dream in the meantime, and I'll check to see if Gehrman's there. If he is there, it'll stay on camera, and I'll start talking. If he's not, we'll just skip it, and I'll see you in Hemwick. So I guess we'll find out together what happens next. See you soon. Right, so as you could probably tell by just my coming in here in Hemwick and having skipped my returning path to the Dream, you can probably already tell that I did not run into Gehrman. He was not hanging out in the garden. However, in the course of running to the garden, I realized I picked up another item, a decorative item here for these messengers, and I haven't shown it off yet. And, this is a 10-year celebration of Bloodborne. We want to show off as many aspects of it as we can. So I figured I'd dress them in the Messenger Urn Festival item. So now they all have jars on their heads. The little jars of incense worn upside down. So that's what's going on. Also, I'm a little bit curious as to whether or not a certain change has taken place here in Hemwick. We're going to find out. Can I one-shot? Yes, I can. Uh-oh. I missed to get the rally going. Can I still one-shot even with the reduced damage? Not quite. Okay. So when I'm at full health, I get a little bit of a damage boost from one of my gems. That allows me to one-shot these enemies, as opposed to coming very, very close to doing so otherwise. Wait till that misses. Okay. And, different implement there means she potentially had a different health pool, so I wasn't sure about that. Now, there's one thing about Hemwick. This obviously isn't the way to the residence. This is what I wanted to show off. So this is another change to Hemwick. If you recall, this is the enemy that we were up against in the Witch of Hemwick boss fight. And obviously, it's quite tough. Very painful. I've run into a patrol. This is the exact sort of ambush that I was hoping to avoid the first time around. And Rally won't save your life if you can't dish out the damage fast enough. So I don't know if it was worth dying over necessarily, but, I wanted to show off the fact that you have these new enemies that spawn into Hemwick. I'm going to make an effort to get my blood echoes back, however many there were, just because, this person has them right here. That's going to make it relatively easy. Alright. Aw, I thought I could 1-2, and then the second swing would defeat this enemy. But clearly not. Well, that's okay. I wanted to show off that enemy spawning in, because it's sort of the coolest way. I was talking before about how Bloodborne sort of changes to... as the night goes on, as you get to these different phases, the game transforms around you. And I thought the presence of this particular enemy... Oh, I've just ended up fighting everyone all over again. Alright, so be it. We get some L2 attacks going on here. Let's see how the enemy likes that sequence. Now, that put me in negative stamina, so yeah, I had to sort of wait my turn after that, but it worked out. Much more successful second attempt there. Yeah, I think it's one of the coolest ways that the game does transform, is that you go to this area that had been relatively restrained. Like, it was already difficult. I think I died at least once to this sort of ambush setup, if not came very close to dying on my first journey through Hemwick. But if you wait until nighttime to come here, all of a sudden these enemies pop up and they sort of change the nature of the combats and the ambushes that happen. And they're not just here, they're also all along, if you remember Sharpshooter Alley, as I call it, with all the gunners waiting around, like around the bone marrow ash and everything. As you make your way towards Hemwick, those enemies will start popping up as well. And this is true of both the boss fight, which I unfortunately didn't remember to show off, but also at this point in the game, maybe because I do want to drain my insight at some point. Maybe I can come back here and demonstrate that at some point as well. But if you have no insight, definitely for the boss fight, I'm pretty sure for these regular enemies as well, those enemies don't spawn. So it's another way. Not only does the game transform around you sort of naturally as the night progresses, but also the state of your insight, the state of your knowledge of the world transforms the game around you with time as well. And of course, there's the classic question, which version of reality is the real version of reality, right? If you've got enemies that only appear when you have a certain amount of insight, well then, what are they really there? If you can not have insight and then just not encounter them at all, very cool aspect of Bloodborne that just sort of is mechanically ever present, ever there in the background. Certain attacks, right? So with your increased knowledge of the world comes the possibility of just sheer madness, of taking damage in ways that are utterly impossible otherwise. And, you know, I already talked about it, and I just think it's cool. It's just a really cool element of this game. And very fitting for the sort of Lovecraftian genre, cosmic horror depiction that, you know, I've mentioned that I think this game is at the very least in conversation with, because of the way that it mechanically embodies these sorts of changes to the world. But anyway, speaking of changes to the world, we came very far to get what is not all that, you know, as stellar of a dialogue. So let's just not hype this up more than it needs to be hyped. I'll just talk to this person. Was that the Graveyard Murmurs? I don't know. This is the person. I feel like this is a sensible progression, right? We've talked to enough of these people that I feel like you can get something of a sense for how each sort of individual storyline is being pushed a little bit further, in that you have like Gilbert, who's the most rational, and he's sort of holding on to his rationality but getting sicker. You've got people who are, you know, initially a little bit confrontational. They're getting confronted by things, or perhaps otherwise suffering, and you're seeing just this general heightening of intensity all around, right? This general increase of sort of manic energy. And that's right. We come to this person here, and the first time we talk to her, she says, "Do you hear the Graveyard Murmurs? Then it's almost time. I can't wait," right? And that's already, like, that initial dialogue from her is already something that you might ascribe to phase 2 already. So where does she really have to go from there? A scream. Sort of makes sense. It doesn't always make, like, you can't always draw a perfect line, right? Like, why are the people who are chanting getting elevated to strange noises and screaming? And what's happening with these transformations, like the implied transformation of a child, the precious baby, right, who is being told to stay away, if indeed that is how that is meant to be interpreted. I have to admit the possibility of alternative interpretations there. But those are all different ways in which, you know, even if it's not 100% predictable how the ante is going to be upped, you can say pretty confidently that the ante is going to be upped in the, like, at all as a baseline. So anyway, we're going to try again for Gehrman, and if I don't find him in the dream, then I'll see you in the Forbidden Woods. Otherwise, I'll see you in the dream. Once again, we get this very suspenseful moment. Where will I see you next? And as you can tell, again, from my coming straight into the Forbidden Woods here, thanks to the magic of editing, I was not able to run into Gehrman again. He was once again not present where I wanted him to be in the dream. So, oh well. I was reminded, however, in the process of warping to the dream, I'm, at the moment, flying rather close to the sun. I like to have a little bit of a buffer, like a little bit of episodes done in advance, so I can sort of work in recording phase and then editing phase when I'm making these episodes, and I've been busy enough that that buffer has essentially disappeared, which has its downsides. Namely, if I get any more surprises at work, these episodes are going to start getting delayed. I really don't want that to happen, but it's a little bit out of my hands. But anyway, that's sort of neither here nor there. I bring that up because it means I'm relatively recent on reading through comments, and that comes with some advantages. And Big Gubosu has done it again. This is a very, very small thing, very subtle thing about the Japanese that Big Gubosu has pointed out, and that I thought was very cool. You probably don't care about it unless you're like a linguistics sort of nerd like me, but I think it's very interesting, right? We have the verb here when it comes to using these lanterns, right? So if we read out the sentence, Karyudo no yume, which is the hunter's dream, ni, that's a particle that's telling you it's the location to which you're going to apply the verb. And the verb in this case is kaeru. And kaeru means like to return, but it has a little bit of a nuance of go home, right? It's when you are using the word kaeru, you're sort of implying that you're going back where you came from to some sort of like home base situation. It's a little different, right? You can sort of see the implication of this, and it's not like a hard and fast rule. I don't think this is something that a lot of Japanese players would like, or players, Japanese speakers would consciously think about. I think it's just a very subtle sort of distinction. But if you think to all the menus that you can get in video games, a lot of the times in English, you know, you go into a menu, and if you want to exit the menu, you'll get a little button that says back, right? That button in Japanese is almost never kaeru. It's almost always modoru. Modoru is another way of that you can say like to return in Japanese. And so what's the difference between modoru, go back, like in a menu, and kaeru, go back as in like return? Well, kaeru, I think, has this sort of subtle implication of returning home. So there's a little bit of a subtext here in the very verb that gets used for going back to the dream in Japanese. You have sort of return home to the dream. Now, it's not, like I said, this is very subtle. I don't want to imply that there's some sort of problem with whatever translation. I don't even remember what the English translation for this is. I haven't really thought about it this way before. It's sort of just system text in my mind, right? So that's why I think this comment struck me so much, is because it took an aspect of the game that I haven't really thought about before, and it made me think about it. And I thought that was cool, and I wanted to share it with you, like, in a video. And again, like, this is very, like, connotation-y type stuff. So I don't think it would necessarily consciously register with a lot of Japanese players, but I do think there is something to it, right? I think there is just this subtle nudge to the fact that you are using the verb kaeru to talk about going back to the hunter's dream, implies that as you get in an English dialogue, right, you talk to Gehrman very close to the start of the game, and he says, this will be your home for now, right? Sort of encourages you just very subtly to, like, nudge you in that direction of the hunter's dream is home. And I thought that was just a cool little point, and wanted to bring that up in an episode. So now I've done that, and we can get back to exploring. I think, yeah, that's right. This bird is behind the gravestones. So I'm very lucky that the hitbox was somewhat generous in that case. But we have to use L2 to strike downwards at these birds, or we may achieve nothing. All right, and as I almost fall to my death getting these antidotes. Of course, classic antidote situation, right? Same exact situation that we were in when we were entering Old Yharnam. You get a bunch of antidotes towards the start of an area, and you think, uh-oh, poison's coming. Yeah, poison's going to be coming. But this is also reminding me of something I said a couple episodes back. First of all, this door won't open. Yep, doesn't open from this side. So, can't quite go into this building yet. But we do have buildings, right? And this is one of the things that gets me back to what I was reminded of and then forgot about, and I'm not reminded of again! I'm so easily distracted. Anyway, get out of here, grass. The thing that I want to point out, that I want to pay attention to as I'm making my way down through the Forbidden Woods, is sort of the way that this area functions as a little bit of a blank space, and the relative lack of like genuinely new items. Now, there's a lot of items that we'll find in the Forbidden Woods, and some of them are genuinely new. But even among those genuinely new items, relatively few of them are going to tell us much about the Forbidden Woods itself. And I think there's a sense in which the Forbidden Woods just sort of serve as like this almost buffer region in terms of the way that the game works, because you've got all of the stuff that happens to you in the main city of Yharnam, and there's a lot that's happening. And then you get to Byrgenwerth on the other end of the Forbidden Woods, and you get some very consequential stuff that happens there. And that area, as we'll see, is relatively small. So very highly dense in terms of the information that you get from that area. But the Forbidden Woods is just this, it's a little bit of a blank. It's a little bit gameplay focused. I mean, it's not like there's nothing, right? And there is also, right, we can see there's the doorway up here. I don't think we ever go there, frankly, but it looks like we might be able to go out onto that sort of wooden support structure there. We can definitely go into the area just behind this door, as we've been indicated from the fact that, oh, it doesn't open from this side. Look, I can see an item in there, right? You just know we're going to be in at least that part of this building at some point. So that part of it will be traversable, but we're also getting a sense of the dilapidation, right? This is all overgrown. It makes sense because this whole region's sort of been forbidden. It's sort of been another cut-off region like Old Yharnam, maybe. We've got a lot of overgrowth on the walls here, right? It's just visual storytelling, which, admittedly, I've said before, I'll say it again, I'm not the best at analyzing, but I do think it's worth noticing, right? You have this whole area out here that sort of has fallen apart and at the same time become its own place, even as it rests between two very important areas in terms of the overall story of the game. But yeah, and I think like another similarity as we'll go through this place that I think you can think of is the Chalice Dungeons, because that's another area of the game where you get a lot of room to explore and engage in the gameplay, and there are certain visual elements that are very important to the storytelling in Bloodborne. I mean, not a ton, especially because the chalices, unlike the Forbidden Woods, are meant to be more interchangeable. But there are still some visual elements that are important down there. But it's more focused on the gameplay and a little bit less focused on genuine novel items. And then again, right, there are some very important genuine novel items in the Chalice Dungeons. They're just few and far between. So I think the Forbidden Woods is just a little bit like them in that sense as well. But again, we're just going to have to sort of pay attention to that in general as we make our way through this region. Oh, I need 2 swings. Alright. Approach that as something of a rule in and of itself. Gotta expect to take 2 swings. Come over here. Alright, we have an upgrade material. Again, one of the messages they are definitely sending you by giving you just regular treasures in the world that are twin bloodstone shards. Start getting things up to +6, right? Got all these weapons. Got to keep them upgraded. And I like the way that they've given you, right? So as of this point, the only Chalice dungeoneering that I've done has been on camera. I still think, right, I wanted to do some interstitial stuff after Vicar Amelia, but as I was sort of implying before, my work schedule hasn't really allowed for it. At some point, I still want to go and do a dive into the Chalice dungeons, give me a little bit more leeway in terms of levels and upgrade materials and things. But up to this point, the only Chalice dungeoneering I've done is sort of dipping my toes in on camera, and I think the game sort of expects you to at least experience that once on your first playthrough to get a sense for what they are. They give you that direction, right? You get that push to go into the Chalice dungeons, partake in communion, you know, as every hunter before you has. So I think we can sort of take this as a relatively representative experience that a first-time player might have, where they sort of dip their toes in the chalices and come back out again. Up to this point, right, I've been switching weapons relatively frequently, right? Let's just look back on some of these things, right? I experimented with the saw spear. Well, that's what I'm using now. I'm settled on the saw spear. I experimented with the saw cleaver. Always mix up those 2 items, apparently. I've gotten my hunter axe to +3. I was running around. I was using that in Old Yharnam. I started the game with the threaded cane. I got my Kirk hammer up to +3. I was using that a bunch in the lead up to this area here. And we've got, of course, Ludwig's Holy Blade at the moment that we're sort of focusing on in this part of the game. I'm going to eventually get this rifle spear broken in the sense that we're going to find a way to make it do way more damage than it should. But that's sort of one of the things I've been hoping to gain a little bit of strength from the chalices for, because I need my bullet tinge up to 9, but that's okay, right? Just because we can't use it yet. We would need a strength of 18 in order to be using this stake driver, so we're a little bit shy of being able to use that just yet. I might bump, again, maybe possibly chalice exploration related, maybe not. I'm sort of tempted to bump my strength to 18 just to play around with this, but we've gotten enough upgrade materials, right? We haven't gotten every single weapon up to +6, which is ideally what you would want to do if you're doing like a sort of a scientific comparison of what each weapon can do. If you want to really find out what each weapon's strengths and weaknesses are and compare them to one another, you want to get each weapon to the point where they each have all 3 blood gem slots unlocked, right? I mean, you could do it at earlier points in the weapon development trade, but that's going to make your progress through the game more difficult. So, you could argue they don't quite give you enough to get all the weapons that you would like to the 3 gem slot level, so that you can do those like full-on comparisons that you would get with everything at +6. They're not that generous, but they are generous enough to let you do a bunch of figuring things out. And quite frankly, like with these games, the Soulsborne games as a series, often the most important thing about a weapon isn't like how you're going to amplify it with your blood gems and this, that, and the other thing. It's often all about which moveset you prefer. And we've definitely been able to get a sense for each weapon's moveset as I've been going through this playthrough, sort of stumbling around, maybe building a little bit less than ideal. They've given us room to mess around and experience different options and have fun and focus on what we think is engaging. And I want to point this out because one of the points of criticism for this game is that you don't get enough weapon variety, and a lot of the cool weapons take too long to come into your possession. And I don't think that point is moot, right? I don't think there's nothing to it. I definitely think if you ever want to do a game of Bloodborne and you come in with the mindset, okay, I'm going to use this, right? Like if I came into this game and was like, I'm going to do a run where I just focus on the stake driver, you can't start a new game and really effectively plan. I mean, maybe you can, right? You can sort of go out of your way possibly to make it happen. I haven't tried to do it, but I imagine it would be difficult. You would really have to go out of your way to try and make this work. And there are other weapons that we still haven't even gotten yet, right? That we get very, very late on into the game. And so if you want to experience a playthrough from start to finish with any given weapon, you can't really do that with a lot of weapons. You get like a choice of maybe at least 3, possibly 4, if you count the saw spear. The saw spear and the saw cleaver are pretty similar. But you get the 3 starting weapons that you can pick from in the dream, and you get the saw spear. Right? So there's validity to the criticism that Bloodborne doesn't really give you a lot of options with these weapons. Now, to be fair, right, one of the elements of this game is replaying it, right? Is you go into a new game plus cycle. By the time you finish your first run, you've had a chance to play around with every individual weapon. And at that point, you can be like, okay, this is the weapon I like. I want to focus on doing a complete playthrough with this weapon at its best. And the game gives you the tools to do that style of playthrough. And it also gives you enough tools, as I'm saying now, to play around and sort of find which one you like. What it doesn't do is allow you to do sort of a focused build right from the start of your first game. And so I agree that that's a shortcoming of this game. But at the same time, I do want to point out it gives you some flexibility, and it gives you the, not just a little bit of flexibility, but a decent amount. And at this point, right, they're starting to throw us more Twin Bloodstone Shards. You really only need one weapon. This is the other thing about Bloodborne. Pretty much any of these weapons, you can make work. I've never really tried the Saw Spear, and I've never really tried the Stake Driver, but every other one of these weapons, I can say at this point, I feel pretty comfortable with, and I feel comfortable enough to say, yeah, you could just beat the whole game with this weapon. Now, maybe that's not taking into account PvP at all. I never engage with PvP in these games, ever. I always play them offline. So, that could potentially be an issue, and I can't really speak to that experience. But as far as my experience with this game is concerned, like, I have felt a little bit of constraint going from weapon to weapon, and you've heard me verbalize it throughout this playthrough, but it really hasn't been that severe. And if it was that severe, I would have had even more options, right? If I hadn't been prioritizing making progress in the above-ground world, I could have been making more progress in the chalices, and that would, in turn, would have given me more options for doing even more with these weapons. So I do think the game does give you a good variety. Boy, I really did not plan to get into that conversation right now, but I totally did. Oh well. This is something to note about the Forbidden Woods. Boy, that thing would have smacked me right in the face. And not only that, right? You think it's strong, and then you get an additional surprise after you activate the trap, and the thing rolls over into this river down here, right? So, oh, okay, yeah, can't pick up the Quicksilver bullets. So this is another aspect of the Forbidden Woods. This is another aspect of Forbidden Woods storytelling. First of all, it's telling you gotta look out for traps, and it took me ages, by the way, right? I knew that this set of logs on the ground indicated a trap for a very long time, almost from the first time I played through the game of Bloodborne. What I did not know, for for an embarrassingly long amount of time, is that those piles of logs aren't the trap. That button right there, that's the trap. And those piles of logs, right, I mean, in terms of the, like, actual way that the game works, these piles of logs are, like, an additional signal to players that there's something to note about this location. But in theory, right, you just think about this bit of wood as another, like, part of the ground, essentially, right? You think about this as it's sort of meant to serve as camouflage to this like giant metallic contraption that you step on. It's a very visible sort of button that activates this trap. But in addition to the fact that this is telling us early and in a memorable way that traps are going to be part of our experience as we make our way through the Forbidden Woods, it's also reinforcing the idea that this area is dilapidated. Right, remember, so I was talking about the visual analysis of that building over there, and we can sort of see we've got the lanterns hanging in these sort of haphazard ways. We've got these hats that are stuck through this old boot on top of this thing, right? These are all, we've got cobwebs very visibly along these markers, right? We're seeing all these visible signs of decay. This is another sign of decay in a very fun and interactive way, right? Sort of very gamey way of calling attention to this, right? Not only is there a surprising trap, but there's a second surprise. It's such an old trap, it's even more deadly in a sense because it does something unexpected. It falls apart and then rolls off in this direction to cause potentially even more carnage if you dodge that initial swing. And you know, classic trap thing, right? You could potentially catch these enemies in it. I tend not to go for that because it's a little bit unreliable, but, you know, that's just my playstyle, essentially. Okay, I want to have my gun out because we've got an enemy that I can actually parry over here. Hello there. Swing at me. Aw. I say I can actually parry, but in fact, maybe I can't. Okay. And is that going to stay? Okay, good. That's not going to fall. So I can recover some blood vials. Good to know. But yeah, these enemies are, of course, familiar. And I'm going to make use of some more advanced knowledge of mine here, which, you know, I was talking about it in Hemwick. Depending on where you stand, you can get different effects, right? So just by standing there, I know I'm going to call some dogs to me. One of them is going to die in the fire. I'm going to dodge this one. Oops. Alright, it's going to jump. Oh, it's going to bark. Okay, now it's going to jump. And there we go. So we pulled away the dogs just by standing in the right place. And now we can deal with the enemies. And one of the fun things, you don't necessarily know about that thing with the dogs unless you've played the game before. You're probably going to be tempted over here by this item. But once you do sort of know about those dogs, pulling one over and then having it get caught up in one of these burning fires here is sort of a subtle hint that allows you to know, oh, okay, right? These fires are going to do damage. And you can see this enemy throwing the oil urns here. And you can know, okay, if I get hit by that oil urn, I'm going to take extra damage from fire, right? So this is a very, not only is it an intricate ambush, but it's also one that's set up in such a way as to give you all the information you need to avoid it if you're approaching it carefully. All right. additional oil urn thrower. Okay. Hatchet men. The hatchet men here could be a problem. Uh-oh. Yep. Indeed, they can be a problem. So I talk about the ambush, and it got me. Totally got me. Funneled all my attention into taking out the oil urn throwers so that I could not have to then worry about the increased fire damage that I could see being set up, and surrounded me by enemies who were designed to rush me when I did exactly that. So there was yet another layer to the complicated ambush design of that particular setup. Alright, I probably can't pick these up because they're bullets. Oh, I could. Right, because I fired at that thing to get the parries. That thing. That, venerable monster. I probably should have just run, right? If you just run straight ahead, you can just completely avoid that trap. You have faith and just book it. You can make it work. I want to try not using my gun against this enemy. Okay. That was a bad idea. I hit R2 instead of R1, and that slowed me down enough that it was a problem. But 3 swings of the sword takes that enemy down. Getting more materials there. See if I can actually watch the dog run into the flames this time. Now, that one makes it through just fine. Oh, but it came back. Ha! Foolish dog. Now let's see if I can stand here. Get the other one to come at me. Here it goes. That one... Maybe that's the one that always runs into the flames, the other one. And this is the one that doesn't. One of them usually makes it through without issue, so... Oops. Thought I'd be further away. I figured the dog was going to lunge, but I thought I would be further away. Alright, now... Let's come at this situation a little bit more effectively this time, shall we? Where did those axe hunters come from? Okay, that's the one that has my blood echoes. Oh, I see them. They're standing way over there. Alright, so I'll have a little bit of time. I think really what I want to do is just come at it from a deeper ambush angle. I did not realize getting hit by that oil would interrupt my attack. Ha! I've turned the trees against you! There we go. Solve that problem. Oh, the tree is no longer... The subtleties of fighting in the forest. The trees are only so wide. Take a step forward. There we go. Right into my R2. You just gotta strategically plan out your attacks a little bit better than I did the first time. And now, having circled around and dealt with all of those enemies... Oh, looks like there's one more who hadn't joined the party. The one very important enemy that had my blood echoes, of course. Overwhelm that wooden shield. And then we can come over here. And take out that one all on his own. And carefully avoid the flames so as not to take damage from them ourselves, like the dogs. Grab the items. And voila, we're almost as good as new. We're just missing 1 blood vial. So, not bad, really, for that sort of exchange. And, okay, I think there's one of these paths. Is it both? I think it's just that one. One of these paths leads to an extra item. Okay, this one doesn't. Oh, and I've died. I've died several times, so I don't want this. Which one of these menus? Not that one. This one. Here we go. Need to do more practice with the menus still. But that's okay. Got my lantern on at the end of the day anyway. And this is going to be the little place that we can run down and grab an extra item. Get a little bit of treasure. Oh, and get a little bit of materials. Once again, because this Holy Blade is doing physical damage... Oh, shoot. Okay, that was close. The crow helped me out by sort of raising up its head to attack. But, I forgot I needed to use my L2s there. There we go. 3 more twin bloodstone shards if I wanted to upgrade another weapon to +6. Which I might end up doing. I don't know. Got a good amount of blood echoes, too. This is the other thing about the Forbidden Woods. They start giving you a lot of blood echoes for enemies that are relatively easy to beat. And familiar ones at that, right? Like, every enemy we've seen so far has been familiar. that's one aspect in which the woods do not ultimately disappoint, right? There is a sense of novelty in exploring the woods in the enemy variety, but it doesn't start out that way. It gets that way as you move deeper into the woods. I don't think we're going to get that far today. I want to go a little bit further than I've gone so far, because we really haven't gone far at all. But yeah, we are at a potential stopping point. I'm just not satisfied yet. I haven't had enough. There we go. Right, if you step, it's another one of these things, right? This place is falling apart. That wasn't necessarily a trap. It was just a falling apart passage, right? I don't necessarily know where that path, if I can get any sort of camera angle. There we go. I don't necessarily know where that path was supposed to lead, but it was supposed to hold up longer than it actually did, right? There's a sense in which this was a little bit of a pitfall trap, but there's also a sense in which it was just this place is falling apart. And so these two things have become intertwined. These different sort of gameplay storytelling elements of the Forbidden Woods. And it's not over. This central section here is definitely a trap, right? You can see all the piled up wood. Oh, I thought the crows would be right there. All right. And I knew the thing would jump into the air, so I was okay using my horizontal attack. I thought that crow was dead already. Oh, it barely survived my attack. That explains it. Okay. Oh, and I had just enough time to wait for the enemies to waltz down here on their own. Thanks for taking the ladder, friend. If you had dropped on me, it might have been annoying. But no. Oh, did someone else come down the ladder? I'm hearing too much movement is the problem. It's not easy to distinguish which enemies are where. Alright. Might as well heal up, get my damage boosted again. I sort of suspect I'm going to get mobbed as I climb up this ladder, straight through this board. That's been there. That's not just a 1.00 thing. That's been in the game for a very long time. I did not mean to do that transformation attack, but boy did it work out. Crowd control! Uh-oh. Not as controlled as I would like. However, it did have the side benefit of bringing me closer to this enemy, which was going to throw Molotov cocktails at me. Would have been bad. Okay, gotta manage my stamina better. I've been going straight HP, but it might honestly not be a bad idea to start boosting stamina. Yeah, okay. You can shoot at me. You can shoot at me. I prefer it when you hit the house. Boy, that ricochet sort of worked in my benefit, because it allowed me to attack more quickly than if my attack had gone through, and since I hit this enemy anyway, I got a little bit of a faster method of attack. There's some pungent blood cocktails, right? So far, like, all this whole little, like, dilapidated village section here has provided me have been very familiar items, right? Some engaging ambush structure, a bunch of blood vials, a lot of fun, like, dynamic elements in terms of the collapsing wood things, the board that you can just walk through as you make your way up the ladder. All those different aspects of the game, right? Very engaging. Like, sort of secret paths around these houses. And eventually, we'll be able to get inside at least one of them. Here we go. Forget which one of these have houses have items inside of them. But we can explore around inside. At least one of them has an item inside. Another one, I think, contains a shortcut, although not in this part of the game. Here we go. Here's the other entryway. Sort of back way that you can really only come in here. So there's a lot of engaging stuff, and a lot more to give us a sense of what it's like living out in the Forbidden Woods, where the town of Yharnam has really shut its gates on you, right? As we'll see, Byrgenwerth isn't a great support for this place either. It's sort of become its own little lawless region with these dilapidated places. But that's not where I want to go. There's another, like, housing structure. Here we go. Around this way? Is this the way I came in? I always get so lost in the Forbidden Woods. You can go inside some of these houses without necessarily going around any secret doors. Okay, no items in this one. Come back here. Is this what I was thinking of? No, it's going to be a one-way fall, I'm pretty sure. Is this the way? This must be the way I came in. Yes? No? I can't tell. I don't think so. Am I back? Oh, I'm so turned around. It is not hard to turn me around like this with my incredibly poor sense of video game geography. All right, I've tried to pick up that item before and failed. So I think I know where this is. But there is one house sort of towards where we came in. This must be towards the way we came in. No, it's not. It might be towards the way we came in, but it's not the way I want to go. Is this what I'm thinking of? Ooh, I might have to, like, fast forward this episode. Oh, new item. Might have to fast forward this episode or something until I'm no longer hopelessly lost. Okay, this is what I'm thinking of. Okay, it doesn't open from this side. Right, and that explains why I'm so confused. Because, we do need to go through this way eventually. But, I'll show you why I'm not going this way. Is because, if you see over here, look at the top left. I have experienced oil, right? This is a giant oil slick. And you've got enemies that throw Molotov cocktails at you, which deal fire damage, which gets boosted by that oil. And boy, does that pile up on you fast. That is a painful combination. Anyway, is this... Okay, yeah, this is Quicksilver bullets I failed to collect. However, I'm not solely interested in going forward that way. And if you look... Oops. So, once again, we're seeing another one of these traps with the sort of disguised button, where the disguise tells you, or at least me anyway, is a better indicator of the trap than anything. And I'm pretty sure... I didn't really show this off with the other trap, but you can sort of see... It would help if I knew where the trap was. I think... Is that it right there? Well, let's find out. All I need to do is run, I think, and I'll be okay. Oh, okay. So I did not properly locate this trap. And once again, right, this one breaks as well, although it doesn't break in the same way. It doesn't completely come off the chains and start rolling at you. It just, you know, collapses. So once again, we're telling the story of traps and decay and the ruins, sort of, the dying embers of a civilization. Okay. And I've already been down here. That much I remember. Can grab this item. Okay, Quicksilver bullets that I cannot pick up because I am at max Quicksilver bullets. And this is the house here that for ages I thought was just where you could talk to the character to get the tonsil stone. I thought that's just where that character was. You can sort of almost see inside there, that little, like, crack. You can see there's an NPC on the other side there. And if we talk to this person, we've already done the tonsil stone thing, so this isn't going to be like it was for me back in the day, but we can talk to yet another person in the nighttime phase of Bloodborne. Let's see what they have to say.
Oh, heavens, would you stop that? Every peep you make brings us bad luck. I have it bad enough already. Please, just leave a poor old woman be.
Some interesting touches on the translation there, right? They've rearranged some of the information to make it a little bit more natural in English, and I don't think if you just read the subtitles, the Japanese subtitles, you would necessarily know that this character is female. So the fact that the translators knew to have that line say, just leave a poor old woman be, right? It goes back to the idea that they're more involved in the voice lines. They were probably working with the specific voice actor who was going to deliver these lines, so they had the luxury of knowing they were going to cast a female voice actor to do this set of lines, so they could use just leave a poor old woman be, as opposed to just leave an old person be, if you got like a very literal translation. And that would have sounded a little bit clunky if they had had to resort to that. But because of the way that this process worked, maybe they didn't have access to the, voice acting part of the thing. Maybe they didn't have that specific information. But they were working with someone, or they were working as part of their working process. They were able to get the information that this character was intended to be a female character. That's another possibility. But one way or the other, this is an indication that the translators were able to get that information and give a very natural sounding translation, which otherwise they might have had to try and find a way to write around. And that's something that's often a struggle when you're translating from Japanese to English. There are a lot of times where English sort of demands that you use pronouns, and the Japanese doesn't necessarily demand that. Even down to the fact that, right, like it's just a lot more natural in Japanese for characters to speak by saying their own name, right? In the English, referring to yourself in the third person is like very, it's unusual, and it indicates someone who has like a very high opinion of themselves. However, it varies from context to context, but one thing you can say about it for sure is it's unusual. Japanese, not afraid to do that. And there are a lot of things like in this dialogue where you have like, leave an elderly person be, right? An elder, right? Like literally Toshiyori, I think is the term that was used. It's like someone who has like more years than you, or something to that effect, right? It's just talking about an elder. Leave an elder be, right? If in terms of it, there's no need to use any specific gender pronoun there in Japanese. In English, sounds weird whenever you try and talk around it, so that's pretty cool. We're also getting a little bit, and I think I talked about this in Translation Born, a little bit of extra information in the Japanese, because I think I can't remember the exact official translation, but they don't talk about it being the voice that draws attention in the dialogue. They talk about it being like a general sound of some kind, or maybe like a peep, which might imply a voice, right? Every peep you make sort of implies that you're speaking, but it's not as clear as the Japanese, where they just use the kanji for like a voice, right? So that voice of yours, let me run through the dialogue again just for my own benefit here.
Oh, heavens, would you stop that? Every peep you make brings us bad luck. I have it bad enough already. Please, just leave a poor old woman be.
Yeah, so literally it's like that inauspicious voice. So there's an implication from the Japanese subtitle that's a little bit stronger, I think, that it's our implied talking to the person in this house that is getting her to say, like, please don't talk to me, just leave me alone, essentially, right? Because whenever you speak up, you like draw attention to me. And notably, this is not a situation where we never could have talked to this person before. And so this sort of goes back to something I was saying towards the start of this episode. Because we could never have talked to this NPC before, there's no way for this dialogue that we have with her now to be an escalation. So if there's never going to be a point at which we can say it's an escalation, what's the point of making this dialogue just a scream? Like, why put a character here that's just going to scream at us for the sake of, atmosphere on this particular phase of the night, right? There could potentially be a point if you really wanted to drive that home, but then again, if you do that, there's not necessarily anywhere to go. So I sort of like the idea that they've almost reset the progression. She doesn't necessarily sound 100% sane, but she's not like squawking at us like some other people in Yharnam were, right? So there's a sense in which you get this idea that maybe she's faring a little bit better, but in part I think that's just because this is the first time we've interacted with this character before. And we have seen other NPCs who've been able to hold it together better. And in particular, right, if we were to talk to the Erden Chapel Dweller or Imposter Yosefka, right, those characters, fine, right? So it's not literally everybody that's losing it. So there's a way, even within this sort of system, that you can give the characters a little bit of wiggle room. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. I've probably talked more than is good for me, but I've had a great time running around and exploring the Forbidden Woods. We're going to pick things up from here next time. For now, I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening, but I wish all of you good hunting.